מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר, בנודש ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשם ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Please join me in the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We gather together today as the dear family and friends of Marvin Warshay. As we mourn his loss, we must also celebrate the full, rich life he led. Death has taken our beloved Marvin. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For his love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind which brought us joy and happiness and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Ananai natan v'nai lakach, Yehi Shem Ananai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people were well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all it was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. A poem entitled, To My Father. A giant pine, magnificent and old, stood staunch against the sky, and all around shed beauty, grace, and power. Within its fold, birds safely reared their young. Beneath was gentle, and the cooling shade gave cheer to passers-by. Its towering arms, a landmark, stood erect and unafraid, as if to say, fear naught from life's alarms. It fell one day. Where it had dauntless stood was loneliness and void. But men who passed, paid tribute, said, to know this life was good. It left its mark on me. Its work stands fast. And so it lives, such life no bonds can hold. This giant pine, magnificent and bold. Psalm 15. Adonai, mi yagor b'ohalecha, mi yishkom b'har kodshecha. Adonai, who may abide in your house? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? A man of integrity who acts justly and speaks truth in his heart, who has no slander on his tongue, who does no evil to his friend, and has no insult for his neighbor, who has contempt for the wicked but honors those who fear God, who gives his word and come what may does not retract, who does not exploit others for gain or take bribes against the innocent. One who lives in this way shall never be shaken. He's achieved success, who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of little children, who has filled his niche and accomplished his task, who has left the world better than he found it, whether by an improved poppy, a perfect poem, or a rescued soul, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who has always looked for the best in others and given the best he had, whose life was an inspiration, whose memory a benediction. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic master, once observed that there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, but the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all 3. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So today is a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Marvin. We'll each remember Marvin in our own way. Aida, you'll remember Marvin as your beloved husband. Danny and Debbie, Susan and Jay, Elisa and Ben, you'll all remember Marvin as your devoted father. And Marvin was an adoring grandfather to Gabby, Matthew, Marin, Ari, Ilana, Jonah, and Arjun. Throughout his life, Marvin was a caring brother to Leon and Diana, a dear uncle to Jonathan and Ronell and Nathaniel and Shayna, and a dear brother-in-law to Paul and Lee and Lenny and Sue, loving uncle to your families, and to his many nieces and nephews and great-nieces and nephews. Marvin was born in British Mandate, Palestine on January 12, 1934 to Yitzhak and Miriam Warshay. Marvin's parents had a fascinating story. They had come to the States from Poland and Lithuania, Marvin's father via the land of Israel, and they both taught Hebrew here at the Cleveland Teachers Institute. In fact, Marvin's father was Rabbi Cohen's teacher. When Marvin's older brother Lee was 6 and his mother was pregnant with Marvin, his parents decided to move to Palestine to be pioneers, chalutzim, and Marvin was born there. Tragically, Marvin's father died of an infection he contracted from a cut he got out in the fields when Marvin was only 1.5 years old. His mother moved back to Brooklyn with both boys to live with her aunt and uncle, whom the boys called Grandma and Grandpa. Marvin attended PS 179 and then Brooklyn Technical High School. This probably began his lifelong devotion to the Yankees. Marvin graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and then received his master's and PhD from Illinois Institute of Technology. Marvin was a very good student and received A's in some classes and from some professors that were just unheard of. Marvin originally met Aida in her hometown of Steubenville, Ohio, when she was 6 and he was 8. He was visiting his aunt, and she had just gotten her tonsils out. She remembered he was very kind. Fast forward 18 years, and Aida was working at the JCC in Detroit and planning a trip to New York. Her mother told Marvin's aunt, and the next thing you know, Marvin and his mother sent a very nice letter inviting Aida to stay with them. So she decided to change her reservation and stay there. Marvin picked her up at the airport, and they sat up talking long after his mother and aunt went to bed, till 2 a.m. The next day, Marvin had to go to work, but he came home with a tennis racket because Aida had mentioned that she liked to play. They played, and the next day she was leaving to go into New York City. And Aida said, I very much enjoyed being with you." Well, Marvin agreed, and the next day he came to New York and walked her all around, and they had a dinner date. Then Marvin came to Steubenville for the high holidays, and the phones in Steubenville were ringing off the hook. Who was Aida's friend? Where was he from? Is he Jewish? And are they serious? The next month, he came to visit Aida in Detroit and proposed, just 6 weeks after they had met. He brought her a copy of the Treasury of Jewish Folklore, and they had a wonderful time reading stories to each other. They were married on February 11th, 1962 in Steubenville. Marvin always put family first. He tried to help Aida memorize all his aunts and uncles before the wedding. Marvin was very interested in family genealogy and always sought opportunities to meet new family members and invite them over. And Marvin embraced his daughter-in-law and sons-in-law as his own children. He was equally proud of all their accomplishments. Marvin worked at NASA for 37 years. He took so much pride in his work. Marvin received the Exceptional Service Award. Upon his retirement in 1999, he received the Distinguished Service Award. For 14 years during his retirement, Marvin was a consultant for the fuel cell industry. He earned a wonderful international reputation for his expertise. One day, Marvin's non-Jewish colleagues at NASA were discussing who among them was the best Christian, and they decided it was Marvin. Our Jewish friends will understand what they meant was that Marvin was the ultimate mensch. He was generous, honest, always willing to help out. People enjoyed talking to him and felt it was a privilege to know him. And Marvin had a great sense of humor. Marvin had a very strong Jewish identity. Marvin was observant. He took traditions and customs seriously. When Danny was in Bar Mitzvah Club, Marvin started putting on tefillin each day, a tradition he practiced for many years. He enjoyed going to visit Gabby's class in Providence, Rhode Island, to demonstrate how to put them on. Marvin enjoyed building a sukkah, and his family will remember the first sukkah he put up. It was an engineering masterpiece. Aida sewed the pale blue polyester fabric cover for the walls, and Marvin used electrical conduit for the corners. It took him 8 hours to assemble. Marvin was an avid gardener, and at one point he tried growing etrogim, but they didn't do so well in our Cleveland climate. When the kids were young, they enjoyed Shabbat dinners every Friday. In more recent years, they moved to Susan's house, and Marvin loved to lead the family seders. Marvin was always willing to explain Jewish tradition to people who were not Jewish in a very enjoyable way. Marvin was involved in minyan and recruiting for leaders at Beth El and Shaker Heights. He always read the Haftorah and Shemini Atzeret in memory of his father. He has read it for years at Park Synagogue and also at Bethel and B'nai Yeshurun, and in Providence, Evanston, Illinois, St. Catharines, and Lincoln, Nebraska. He so enjoyed reading, and he really learned how to read Haftorah as an adult. He was so proud that his 6 oldest grandchildren knew how to read Torah and Haftorah. It gave him great nachas. He felt that this was a legacy from his parents, who were Hebrew teachers. On Marvin Aida's 50th wedding anniversary, the Warshay children and grandchildren took over the Torah service at Park Synagogue, and Marvin read the Haftorah. It was a very special day. When Marvin and Aida first got married, they lived on the west side. They got very involved in the struggle for Soviet Jewry through the West Temple. They schlepped 4-year-old Susan to a protest downtown in the early 1970s, and they have a picture of her holding a sign, "Let my people go." Marvin would pack up prepared food, NASA astronaut food, for prisoners of conscience, and mail it to Russia, and they would come back marked undeliverable, person doesn't exist. When Marvin looked back, this was a very, very meaningful time and meaningful project for him. Marvin was always well informed. He read the New York Times and the Republic. He was a student of history. He knew every battle of World War II. He took many classes at the College of Jewish Studies about history, Jewish studies, and Israel, and he had amazing memory. Marvin was also obsessed with political polls, checking multiple times a day. He volunteered most recently for Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama campaigns. And so today may be a time for tears. We're saddened by the loss of Marvin, but we learned so much from him, especially how to to care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, there'll be a time for pondering, a time for contemplation. Marvin will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values he taught us into our own selves. But finally, there'll come a time for song. The time will come we can celebrate Marvin, and we will call all that we learned from him and how he touched each of our lives. May he rest in peace. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of Marvin Warshay be a blessing. Amen. Now I'd like to invite Marvin's children, Danny, Susan, and Elisa, to share some personal words about their father.
Thank you, dear family and friends, for being here today to remember, honor, and celebrate our dad's life. If any of you remember our dad's speeches from our bar and bat mitzvahs, delivered in Yiddish, of course, you will appreciate that I have some brief remarks that I'd like to share with you about my father. Dad, you were funny, friendly, intelligent, generous, logical, warm, and precise. Thoughtful, helpful, purposeful, motivated, interested, knowledgeable, and sensitive. You were a mensch in every sense of the word. While I want to focus on how you lived your life and not how it came to an all too premature end, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the way in which you fought so courageously, always with your incredibly positive attitude. But this makes sense, because this is the attitude you took toward everything. It was never, oh no, that stinks, shoot, why did that happen? But rather, okay, that happened, let's assess the situation and decide what to do. Always very logical. When I left my teaching job, I was a bit worried that you and Mom would be somehow mad or disappointed in me. But you weren't. While you were surprised, you helped me plot out my next steps methodically, making sure that I had a plan, both professionally and financially. You checked in with me periodically and asked, Elisa, how are your finances? As an admittedly overly independent person, I usually declined your generous offers to give me some money. It's okay, you would remind me. It'll just come out of your inheritance. This was one of your favorite lines. There are so many favorite lines that you had, and favorite jokes. I would never tire of hearing the same ones multiple times. In fact, there were many that I loved so much that I would request them. You took so much pride in your job at NASA. I have no doubt that many people who are here today have received presents purchased at the NASA gift shop. Baby clothes, mugs, t-shirts, commemorative coins, and more. I think you kept that gift shop in business. Here are some memories that I will cherish. Going downtown with you each Friday after Thanksgiving. It wasn't about the shopping or the sales, but rather the tradition and spending time together. You told me all about how things used to work when Terminal Tower was a train station. You could always be counted on to relate interesting, albeit lengthy at times, historical information in detail. You thought it was important to spend individual time with each of us. Before Take Your Daughter to Work Day was a thing, you brought me to work with you. I met all your colleagues and learned about what you did. I organized your desk so well that you couldn't find anything anymore. We visited the NASA Visitor Center. Then we cut out early and went to Dairy Queen and the mall. Not a bad day at work. There was also a time that you would rotate taking me, Danny, and Susan out to dinner individually so you could spend one-on-one time with each of us. I would never have passed 10th and 11th grade math or chemistry without your help, though you were probably more dedicated to the cause than I was. You put an incredible amount of work into showing me how to solve each problem with the help of your trusty Shams outlines. We stayed up well past midnight solving equations on many a night. You were an avid sports fan. Each summer, we would make it a point to go to at least one or more baseball games at the old municipal stadium as well as the new one. You were actually one of the few people that knew how to score the game. You'd always buy a program and keep the score. In 1997, when the Indians narrowly lost the 7th game of the World Series, they announced on the news that the team would be arriving at the IX Center. It was about 11 p.m. at night. I said to you, "Let's go and greet the team." Without any hesitation, you said, "Okay," and off we went. We stood there cheering with the rest of the crowd as the team deplaned. Walking a full marathon, 26.2 miles with you, only a few days before your 74th birthday. Training with you, walking progressively longer distances on the towpath. It was a wonderful experience working together toward that goal and crossing that finish line with you. I'm still in awe that we did it each time I look at our finish line photo. I can't say I don't feel cheated. When you heard the phrase, "May you live till 120," you used to say, "I intend to." I never had any doubt that you would live to at least 100. Alas, you won't. But your memory will live on to 120 and beyond. I love you, Dad, now and always.
I've never given a eulogy before, so I did just what my dad taught me to do when faced with something unknown or unfamiliar. I did some research. My dad seemed to know everything, in particular, how to fix anything and everything. But if he didn't know how to fix it, he researched. He searched the internet for information, consulted with the experts at the hardware store, or found a book about it. And when all else failed, he read the directions. He was always eager to learn a new skill or a new way to do something. When Jay and I moved into our first home, whenever we had an electrical, plumbing, carpentry, landscaping, or any kind of home repair issue, Jay's first instinct was always to call a paid professional to come and fix it. I quickly trained him to learn that no, the first call was always to my dad. In our early days of home ownership, I would frequently come home after work and find my dad at my house, often fixing something I didn't even know needed to be fixed. I know Elisa had the same experience. We used to joke that my dad actually had 3 homes. He liked to make what he called site visits, checking on our plants and often leaving written suggestions for what we needed to do, including the basics like watering. At times, I was very grateful not to be home when my dad was attempting a home repair at my house, like the time he was installing a half bath in my Groveland Road home and neglected to turn off the water before unscrewing the plumbing, sending an avalanche of water down my basement stairs. Typically, though, his home improvements were improvements, especially when he followed his own golden rule of home repair: never start a project on Sunday when the hardware store is closed. My dad was an engineer, hence his propensity toward fixing things. Yes, my dad wore a pocket protector. You might think that would mean he was a nerd, but no, on the contrary, Dad had great communication skills and was also a people person. My dad loved meeting new people, learning about their lives, hearing their stories, and sharing his own. He made friends everywhere he went, with waiters, taxi drivers, parking lot attendants, and cashiers, anyone with whom he could start a conversation. And the people my dad loved the most were his family. Family was everything to my dad. My parents made every effort to attend family events, bar and bat mitzvahs, weddings, baby namings, funerals, anniversaries, and birthday parties, even if they had to cross the border with a passport to get there. He loved genealogy and would even explain to my mom how she was related to her own relatives. Thanks to my dad, I actually know the difference between a first cousin once removed and a second cousin. Growing up, our family vacations were not to luxury vacation spots or exotic resorts. Our vacations were to visit family. We made frequent trips to Detroit to visit his brother, my Uncle Lee and Aunt Diana, and cousins Jonathan and Nathaniel. If a cousin's bat mitzvah happened to be in LA near Disney, we got to go there too. But we plotted our family trips based on how many relatives we could see on the way. My dad was so proud of his 3 children. Some of the relatives here may be familiar with the long group emails my dad would send to share any accolade, accomplishment, or honor Danny, Elisa, or I achieved. And he loved his grandchildren. He relished the times he got to go to Providence to see Gabby, Matthew, and Marin. And my children, Ari, Ilana, and Jonah, were fortunate to be in town and able to spend lots of times with Grandpa Marvin and Grandma Aida. Field trips when they were younger turned into lunch dates in more recent years. And they, like Grandma and Grandpa, always looked forward to these occasions. One of the most important things I learned from my dad was that all people are important. All people, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status, deserve respect. It wasn't something he necessarily said, but he taught us by example, by the way he interacted with and treated people. My dad loved life and wanted to live. At every appointment, he tried to minimize his symptoms, hoping that he could convince his doctors that he was strong enough for treatment. He never complained, insisting he wasn't in too much pain. Even in his final days, he was cracking jokes to set everyone at ease and lighten the mood. One morning, I commented to my dad that he had a ton of visitors the day before. "So many people love you, Dad," I said. In typical Marvin fashion, he responded, "What's not to love?" The past few weeks have been some of the most difficult of my life. But I am grateful to have been able to be with my dad daily, all the way up until the end. To hold his hand, to help care for him, and to see his smile light up the room for the last few times. And I will always treasure the memories of his interactions with his amazing nurses and caregivers, Rhonda, Pat, Karen, Lana, and Shanette. Even when he couldn't speak, we could see the gratitude in his eyes for the loving care they provided, and they loved him back. In fact, we started referring to them as his girlfriends. I would give anything to come home and find my dad in the driveway just one more time, fixing something in my house that I didn't even know was broken. But I guess some things just can't be fixed. Thank you for being an amazing father. I miss you already, Dad, and I will love you always and forever.
As Deb, the kids, and I were thinking about what I might share today, a strong theme emerged. The often quirky, always endearing relationship my father had with food. Eating it, growing it, sharing it, even competing with it. So many of these things my family and I loved and also accepted as perfectly normal. But you mean it's not every father who can polish off a mound of fruit in what looks like some kind of a talented circus act? I loved watching Dad take such joy in devouring several apples, seeds, cores, and all, in one sitting. And perhaps it was a sense of responsibility he felt to restore the produce supply he depleted that motivated his pleasure in growing raspberries, blueberries, peaches, grapes, and apples in his beloved garden. Here again, I had no idea that his annual late winter conversion of the second floor and basement into his personal tomato seedling factory was at all unusual. I know that through the years, Dad shared some of these tomato seedlings with many of you gathered here today. Imagine how shocking it was when it became news to me that not every father enters and even consistently wins pickle eating contests. Dad reveled in sharing the details of his victories. Dad also took great joy in sharing his passion for food with his children. A couple of years ago in my baby book, I came across a list of my favorite foods when I was 18 months old. Now see if you can detect my father's influence on my choices. Radishes, salami, and herring. And how many of you have heard the story of when my dad fed me at roughly that same 18 months a glass of black olive juice, mistaking it for prune juice? It was only recently, in fact, that I even wondered why prune juice? And why would anyone store leftover olive juice in the first place? When I was in 10th grade, I invited a new friend from the soccer team to join me at home for lunch after practice. When he asked me what we had to eat, as I often did, I innocently pulled out jars of borscht and shav and a plate of gefilte fish. Let's just say that was the last time that my new friend Russell Glass ever joined me for lunch, but I figured he didn't know what he was missing. Dad's endearing, quirky relationship with food has also insidiously influenced my children's generation. One of my favorite stories is how Matthew used the Yiddish word for the ends of a loaf of bread, skreichikels, with his friends, only to have it suddenly dawn on him that skreichikels is a word that only the Warshays use in normal conversation. Carrying on Grandma Sadie's tradition of feeding us no matter when we arrived at her house, my kids are unfazed when Dad and Mom pull out the strav and borscht when we arrive. As Ilana too recalled just yesterday, for years while growing up, I assumed that everybody had Shabbat dinner each Friday night. It was my friends and now my kids' friends who knew to value this sacred time, as so many of them routinely flocked to our house to share in this weekly meaningful ritual. Yesterday, too, as Marin recalled, one of the funniest examples of Dad's quirky food influence on her, on Matthew, and on Gabby. Their first email addresses, gstravw@yahoo.com, mborschtw@yahoo.com, mrugelachw@yahoo.com. As you all know, these last few weeks have been tough. But through it all, almost up until the very end, Dad got joy and pleasure from eating his favorite flavor of ice cream, coffee. Oh, and by the way, coffee is my favorite flavor, and Gabby's, Matthew's, and Marin's too. We love you, Dad, and we'll miss you terribly.
Thank you all for your most beautiful words. And now I'm going to call up Marvin's grandchildren. All the grandchildren are going to come up, share some personal thoughts.
Grandpa Marvin perfected the art of showing up. He was present in our lives and shared his love wholeheartedly in Cleveland and in Providence. We are all so grateful for his commitment to us, whether he was watching us at sporting events, taking us on field trips, or even making a guest appearance at our Providence Schechter to teach us how to wrap tefillin.
From Passover seders to Shabbat dinners, Grandpa Marvin made spending time with us one of his greatest priorities. Every time we saw him, we heard a new story, or maybe an old one that we'd heard 5 times before. And in the spirit of these stories, we would like to share some Grandpa Marvin memories with you.
My grandpa and I share the same birthday. I am sometimes reminded of the time he visited me and my family in Providence. It was during our birthday. I was about to turn 3 years old. And he asked me, Lauren, whose birthday is it? I answered, mine. And he asked, is it anyone else's birthday? I quickly snapped back and I said no. Over the years, I finally caught on, and I'm so grateful I did. The numerous phone calls over the years of saying, hey, happy birthday, and hey, you too, will always stick with me. Being part of a 5-person family and a 10-hour car trip away, my family and I had to pick carefully the times we visited Ohio. These times were rarely January 12th. But on our birthday, I always knew we were both thinking of each other. It brought us together when we couldn't be with each other in person. It will always be my fun fact, a token I will carry with me forever. Now aware of the special, kind person whose birthday it also was, there will always be room for both of our birthday candles on our birthday cake.
Grandpa Marvin would always take me on field trips to different museums around Cleveland. My favorite memories from these trips came when we were looking around at the exhibits and I would ask him a question. He would never just answer a question with a simple answer. Every answer would involve a long story about his childhood or our family, which I loved. One time at the art museum, we saw a picture of New York, and I asked him a question about it. My question was followed by 30 minutes of stories about Ema and what it was like growing up in Brooklyn. These stories my grandpa told me will always be with me.
One of my many fond memories of Grandpa is brushing and combing his hair in the morning when we visited Cleveland or when Grammy and Grandpa came to Providence. We would sit there for 10 minutes on the stairs each morning, and I would brush and comb his hair while we sang songs and told each other jokes and stories. A task that could have taken 30 seconds took about 10 minutes, and I'll always remember those and him. Thank you.
My Grandpa Marvin was an incredibly fast eater. He could eat a 12-inch sub in the time it took someone to eat half their 6-inch sub, and I remember watching him eat his ice cream cones in record-breaking times. We used to go to Steve's Ice Cream, and I was consistently impressed by how soon my grandpa would finish the ice cream, move on to the cone, and soon there would be nothing left. I used to wonder how he ate so quickly, but to do what he did in our lives takes a lot of energy. To be the type of person he was, to take on so many important roles in all of our lives, to be so ever-present, was no easy task. My mom told me he said he ate so fast because he was always so excited for the next bite, and I think that's how he lived his life, always looking forward to the next bite.
My grandpa really loved fruit. I remember watching him in awe, peeling an orange in one piece or finishing off an apple, the entire apple, core and all. Though I have yet to pick up those skills, Grandpa Marvin did teach me the art of blueberry picking. On one occasion, I remember he brought me and Matthew out to the backyard and let us pick the fruit from his bushes. When Grandpa tells us this story, he laughs, remembering how I went on to pick all the big blue ripe ones, and Matthew was hard at work, only he kept picking the green unripe ones. Amused and determined, he found a way to keep us both excited about the blueberries. He let me carry on with the picking and let Matthew shine at the task of eating them. I love how he totally just jumped in, knowing that there was no wrong way, and just really rewrote the rules. So thank you, Grandpa, for your keen sense of compassion and being such a caring teacher. You will always be a reminder to be kind and nurturing.
Grandpa Marvin and, of course, Grandma Ida were always there for us. It didn't matter how big or how small, Grandpa and Grandma were always there. Heck, Grandpa Marvin visited me in the hospital just a few months ago, even when I was sick. I can't remember an event where my grandparents weren't there. Unfortunately, Grandpa Marvin was not able to make it to my graduation from Northwestern just over a month ago. And while I knew it would in advance, it was still tough to look up into the stands and not see Grandma and Grandpa, especially given how much they assisted with my education. The Stole of Gratitude, worn at graduation, offers graduates an opportunity to say thanks. Thanks for helping me make it through, and thanks for helping me succeed. When I first opened my cap and gown, I opened the stole not really knowing what it was. But as soon as I read the explanation, I knew I was giving it to my grandparents. They are always there for me, for all of us. Thanks for everything, Grandpa. We are forever grateful, love you, and already miss you.
Thank you for your beautiful words. And now we call on Marvin's nephew, Nathaniel, to share some personal thoughts.
What's left to say? And ditto on everything they said. Thank you. It says don't touch. My Uncle Marvin, he was always going up. He made Aliyah while in utero. Okay? When Abba, our grandfather, returned home to Eretz Yisrael with his wife and son, my father Leon, or Aryeh Naphtali. Times were a bit tight then, and they only gave him one name, Mordechai, named for his own grandfather, the great-great-grandson of Hagon Eliyahu ben Harav Shlomo, the Gra. Lately, I've gotten to know my uncle and aunt a little bit more through pictures, a lost medium. Now they're all in silicone. We're a small family. While my cousins had uncles, aunts, and cousins on both sides of the family, besides my paternal grandmother, known simply as Ima, the Shaker Heights Warshays comprised the balance of my extended family, hence the annual or semi-annual Cleveland family trips back and forth from Detroit. Having said this, you may think that my statement that Marvin was my favorite uncle to be a bit superfluous, insincere. After all, I only had one uncle. But I don't use a relative scale. He was absolutely great, okay? And Aunt Aida is absolutely great, too. I learned much from my uncle. As a kid, I would take the Greyhound from Detroit to visit my grandmother, my uncle and aunt, and my cousins. And they included me as part of the family, as a fourth child, okay? Giving me chores and much, much love. One time when I was sleeping in the den, I heard Uncle Marvin getting up very early to leave also early for work. I'm never going to do that in my life, I said. That's insane. Yet, I saw the way he was careful not to awaken anyone, to tiptoe around the house, out of concern, while he was preparing to go to work, to take care of everyone. He demonstrated responsibility, much like the care he gave his gardens. The West Side Market existed to sort of fill in anything he didn't grow. It was with my uncle that I actually attended Mincha and Ma'ariv services for the first time. Shul was very important to him. Kashrut was very important to him. Celebrating Shabbat was important to him. And Shabbat dinners, as was mentioned. He never pushed, but he exerted a moral pull, something to which I was not always attuned. So who were you, Uncle Marvin? He was my father's kid brother. Known as the baby during the Brooklyn years, he was my favorite uncle. He was a scientist you heard about, professionally and vocationally. It didn't stop. I remember Google searching him. There were all these articles in Korean mentioning Marvin Warshay, fuel cells. I don't know. They've got something up their sleeves. He played many roles professionally in the community, but not last, he was a committed Jew and committed to Jews, whether visiting, celebrating, or working his tail off to save a faltering synagogue. He was a pillar in this community. There are 15 Tehillim, or Psalms, which were sung while ascending Har Zion, Mount Zion in Jerusalem, as well as the steps in the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem. As Uncle Marvin first made Aliyah in Euro, he ascended from here this week during the fast of Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, which commemorates the breach of the walls of Jerusalem before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. That happened as a result of our own infighting, affected by the Romans. This was not who he was, right? Psalm 121, which is one of several, starts off a song of ascents, and that's what he did. He would ascend. He ascended to Israel. And this is what epitomizes him. He was always going up for him, for everyone, for all of us. And may his neshama have an aliyah from our presence here, our prayers, the mitzvot we do in his honor, and as a result of our knowing him. Thank you.
Thank you all for your beautiful, personal, touching words. If you're able, please rise now for El Malay Rachamim.
El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bameromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechonam, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'malor Kedoshim Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, et Nishmat Mordechai ben Yitzchak v'Miriam, Shalach le'olamo, B'Gan Eden, Tehei menuchato, Ahanam, Balarachamim, Hastireu b'sedek nafecha le'olamim, Utzeror b'tzeror achayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar. Amen.
eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Marvin Warshay, known in our tradition as Mordechai ben Yitzchak Miriam, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated for just a few moments. This concludes our service here. We'll proceed from here to Beit Olam Cemetery for burial. And following burial, the family receiving visitors at the Warshay residence, 3652 Lattimore Road in Shaker Heights. After burial to 8:30 p.m. tonight, and Friday afternoon 2 to 4, and Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday 2 to 4, and 7 to 9 p.m.